Welcome to the BePure podcast. In this episode, we take a deep dive into the anti-aging movement and wellness for longevity with Tracy Minnoch-Nuku. Tracy is an educated and experienced advocate for women's health and fitness. With over 30 years of experience in the fitness industry, Tracy began her career as a group fitness instructor and personal trainer, where she transformed bodies and lives through movement and nutrition. Tracy spent 20 years developing teams and fitness training programs in Asia in a number of formats, including live, online, and through fitness apps. Tracy's own experience with menopause was messy, and she's been open and honest about it. Without any prior warning, her symptoms began to accelerate and negatively impact on her physical and mental health, work life, and relationships. Tracy documents all her symptoms and experience in her book, My Menopause Memoir, as well as through her highly acclaimed podcast, Sexy Aging. I love the name, by the way. Welcome, Tracy.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. It's so good that we get to catch up again. And, we're in this space together asking the questions. And obviously, lots of women come and ask us things about what's going on with me. So it's nice that we get to chat again.
Likewise, so stoked to have you here. And 100% agree with you. I think this space in particular and the topic of today is something that hasn't been spoken about enough. And it's something that we all experience as women. It's part of our life stage.
Yeah.
And I think women naturally tend to befriend, we sort of see each other and see what others are going through, resonate, and then ask for support that way. So I think the fitting way for us to kick this off is for you to tell us your journey with health and wellbeing and what led you to writing your amazing book.
Yeah, well, you've already mentioned a few things that I've been up to. So I've just relocated back from Asia. It's been 18 months back in New Zealand, which is amazing. It's such a, stunning, clean environment. But during part of that journey, the back end of my career in Asia, I was going through perimenopause. But like so many women, had not heard of the word perimenopause. I think I'd heard of menopause and made the assumption, I don't know why I assumed, but that I would probably not experience any symptoms, of which I didn't know what they were, until I was about mid-50s. And that's kind of my experience with menopause. That was it before I went into perimenopause. Now, I think the hardest thing for people to understand is that perimenopause is the stage before menopause, which is just one day. I'll break that down. Perimenopause has a ton of symptoms, and I personally had 29 of 35 known perimenopause symptoms, and that's where the book comes from. It's like, wow, I have all these things going on with my body. Let me break it down so I can understand it for myself. Let me dive into the science, and let me talk to other women. Are they like you've mentioned, women talk to each other. Are they feeling this? Are they happy to share their story in my book as well? And then the book chapters into the different symptoms. I talk about the science behind what's happening when you have that symptom. For example, weight gain, night sweats, like what's actually happening in the body. That explains how, and then the what you can do about it. So the top tips for most of those symptoms. There's a lot of crossover with symptoms. But yeah, once I got all the concept down into the book, I gave a lot of personal details from a fitness background, and I think that has really resonated with women who like to work out, that like to stay active. I just like to say, even though I have competed as an athlete in the past, I probably resonate more with people that just like to stay fit and healthy, and I like to talk to those people and help them because they might not have as much information and education as I've been able to access. So yeah, and that's sort of like how the book lays out. It's really open-hearted. It's there's quite a lot. It's very open. There's a lot of stuff in there that I never thought that I would share, but it's I'm not serving myself by holding back, to be honest.
Oh, totally. And yeah. I think periods, they've been taboo for ages, and we've started to lift the veil on that and go, hey, look, they're normal. They're part of life. Let's not, label them Shark Week and put them in a corner. And I feel like perimenopause is just getting that light. Menopause is just getting that positive conversation. And it's one where I think society is going, oh, menopause.
Yeah, they're having
Menopause.
a yuck moment with it, actually, Lisa. I think, and it ties into the whole aging culture, doesn't it? It's like, we're not really so happy with the idea of aging. And you mentioned it in the introduction of I'm the anti-aging movement. So there's been many times that I've seen products or commentary or journals or, writings that it sort of has those words anti-aging or stay youthful or whatever. And I'm thinking, actually, there's a lot in aging that's really positive, and we should be looking at that, and also looking at how do we age well, the longevity aspect. And that's the whole point of Sexy Aging, the podcast, because I can put those two words together. They have polarity. It actually is very confronting for people to go, can I be aging and sexy? And I'm like, hell yes. As long as you know what to do, the science, how to move, how to eat well, you rest well, sleep well, have community joy in your life. That's sexy aging for me,
Totally. And I think it was the beautiful words of Marie Curie who said, nothing in life is to be feared, only to be understood. And from that place of understanding, we can run towards it, I guess, not in her direct words, but with a sense of joy and enjoyment. Like, it's actually something to be curious about and go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what I can do with this. So it's seeing it as an opportunity to rise. I think in ancient cultures, we really revere women who are beyond the age of menstruation sort of paths. Like, we sort of look at them as being wisdom givers. We look at them with a sense of reverence, like, wow, you've lived a life. This is cool. Tell me all about it. Give me all of your goodness. And we see that wisdom and that life experience as beautiful. It's not the same kind of beautiful you see on all the magazines with models, but it's beautiful. It's gorgeous. It's just something to be absolutely awed at. And it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I love sitting with people that are, in their sort of last third of their life and listening to what they have to offer, because it's often given with such grace,
yes,
but with such depth as well. You don't get the chitter-chatter and the, it's sort of very, it's profound. It should be somewhere in a book.
Yeah, I love everything that you've said, especially the part where we become fearful of the unknown. And I think that's where we sit with this conversation around perimenopause and aging, or menopause and aging, is just that fear of not knowing. And that's why I feel like, we're opening up the conversation. There's a lot more buzz around it. Menopause is trending now, and I think it's like, once we realize that it's a thing, it's a stage of life, it's the end of the reproductive cycle, that's what it is. There's not a lot to be feared. Not to say it's not a challenging time, it definitely can be for 4 out of 5 women. But, once you understand, you can walk towards it, and you can take all that other life experience that you've had and gracefully move into your post-menopause years, just with a lot more clarity for the future, and obviously less years ahead of you, and just a different viewpoint on, okay, I've got less years ahead of me. How am I going to make that work? I mean, what do I want to get out of the next 40, and if you're lucky, another 50 years past 60, that would be ideal, wouldn't it?
Totally. So my dad says, he's like, look, Lisa, imagine your life's a meter ruler. That's 100 years. Where are you on that meter ruler, and how much more have you got to go? And what are the things you want to do with that? Like, how much do you want to really live into it? And I think menopause actually offers a really apparent moment in life for women to reflect back and go, I don't actually need to be a nurturer anymore. My kids are likely grown up. They're at least in their sort of maybe late teens, early 20s. They're kind of responsible adults now. What do I want to do for me? Who am I in this age? Who's my partner in this age? And what do we want to do together and grow together with that last part of our ruler as such? It's sort of it's a time of release and a time of refinding yourself. And you're kind of more from a hormonal point of view, you're more in a childlike state, which I think is quite interesting in itself, that a lot of women report having better quality of life, a better sense of self in this age group as well. They're going to get past the transition and go, I just feel fantastically me.
Yeah.
It's an amazing thing. But I think that we don't have, health class when we're, 45, and to have that puberty 101 or that reverse puberty 101, which is how we sort of also describe perimenopause to be, that loss of ovarian function. It slowly happens over a 2 to 12 year period prior to our last menstrual cycle.
Yes.
it's sort of like, where's the class on it? Where's the conversation to be had and the shared experience? You know, when we're younger, I don't know about you, but I sat down with my friends and talked about my period being painful or heavy or annoying, or, you know, these zits on my face. So like, what are they? How do I get rid of them? What do you do?
Yeah.
Oh, toothpaste.
Yeah, toothpaste.
That, you know?
I did the same, yeah. But because we talked about it, right? And it was like something that we openly shared. I think probably in my generation, it was still a little hush-hush, but there was definitely conversation. Unlike sort of the experience that I went through with perimenopause, I actually didn't speak to anyone before kind of going, hey, is anyone talking about this? And there were women even, you know, in my age that were in denial as well, I think, which is, no, I can't be, I'm not old enough for that. So, yeah.
So, interesting. When did you start experiencing symptoms? How old were you?
So it's in retrospect that I can look back and go, oh, that's what it was. Because just to give a little context to the situation, so my husband and I were opening and starting up a new company and opening new boutique fitness studios. And so all the stress and the do everything, be everything rolled into one, that part of it made me first of all think that I was just stressed. And that the lack of sleep or waking up in the middle of the night thing, which is a really common symptom for perimenopause, was related to stress and the idea that I had so much to do. So when I do look back at it, I was 47. I probably had 2 to 3 years of symptoms. Yeah, I remember being 50 before I sort of reached out to my gynecologist and said, look, there are certain things happening in my body. And I think my periods became very erratic, sometimes really painful, a lot closer together, which was really unusual for me. And ironically, she said, well, you know, I think a Mirena is really good for you at this stage of life. Without saying the word menopause. And I actually said to her, I think that this is menopause, like this, you know. So I think that I'd been through symptoms for 2.5 to 3 years before I knew that that's what it was. And then after that, you couldn't shut me up.
You're too right. What you're describing, right, is what a lot of women go through, is that initial nervous system load, the sleep, the emotional sort of changes, or the nervous system challenge when you lose progesterone's benefits on helping to balance our nervous system. So I find for a lot of my clients that we get the blessing of working through this time frame with them. Anxiety is usually one of the first things that shows up for them. They're like, I'm a really well-rounded human. I think of things logically, and normally I'm not overwhelmed. I can do a lot of crazy, awesome things, but I'm having little like gritty moments or attacks in my life that I wouldn't otherwise have. And then you start to see that kind of fluctuating estrogen picture come through, where periods start to change, they get closer together, they maybe get a little bit heavier, a bit more painful, more breast tenderness can show up. Then the low estrogen stuff kind of comes through, and we start to see that kind of more like, I guess, night sweats and hot flushes, vaginal dryness kind of comes into play. And then at the tail end of that is sort of the insulin resistance picture, that extra weight gain that can happen quite rapidly for women in particular. It's it's sort of almost like stages of, but no one's ever really gone, these are the stages of perimenopause before you actually stop having a period, and then you have to deal with symptoms even though your period's still gone, but you're moving through this transition, you know?
Yeah, and every woman's journey is different, right? So some of the symptoms that some people start with might not even show up for other women. So that's why it does get really confusing, and it is quite challenging to sit down with a woman and go, are you experiencing this or this or this? And of course, there's the whole mental wellness part of it. You actually hit the nail on the head, Lisa, when you said that anxiety presents itself quite early in the piece. And I can 100% vouch for that. That happened to me. My doubt in my ability as a business person, my doubt in my ability to show up as an educator and stand in front of a group of people and tell them about a concept that I had known for years and years without dropping words. And then starting to, question my ability, wondering if I'd aged out of the fitness industry. So a lot of those things was, true anxiety for me. And I know that people would have looked at me and never have guessed the anxiety level that I was feeling. So it's definitely one of the first symptoms, and I do often speak about that because I want women to know, hey, look, when you start doubting yourself in these ways, irrespective of the environment that you're in, you got to sort of take a look down into yourself, have a question about, what's going on. Is it high levels of stress? What's your age? How are your periods? How are your cycles? And then that piece can quickly come together. This is probably early stage perimenopause.
Yeah, it's so interesting. You kind of that sort of holistic view, right? That how do we put it all together and go, makes sense, I get it. But it's so interesting you say about like your experience with anxiety, even though from the outside and you appear high functioning and life's great. What are you on about? It's not a problem. And I find that for me gives me a whole level of respect for women.
Yeah.
Like new mums, women going through perimenopause, women experiencing anxiety premenstrually, we seem to hold our stuff together. Like it amazes me how women sort of seem to psychologically coach themselves through things, or can manage to hold themselves on the outside when inside they're running around thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to explode. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal what level of resilience women have.
Yeah. Hey, Lisa, what I actually think makes us different between, say, men, because we are dealing with this kind of thing throughout our whole lives. So we have puberty, then we have pregnancy and postpartum, and then pull it back together, and then sleep deprivation as mums, like you mentioned, and then perimenopause. I believe that it's because we talk to each other, and because we surround ourselves in a community, and you see that even in fitness clubs. Group fitness is well known for having lots of women participate. It's just that feeling of community that helps us get through, because I don't think that we necessarily do hold it all together. I think that we actually just have someone that we can talk to. Do you think the same?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a shared experience that women, we're inclined to tend and befriend, right? Like men are sort of like, this is the way I'm going, putting my blinkers on and do. And if you don't follow me, that's cool, but that's where I'm going. Whereas women have this amazing capacity to network, the way that they think, the way that they connect, the way that they rely on others. And that might be one or two really close people in your life, but we still have this capacity to share and nurture each other, which I think is really important, especially in the context of modern society, where we kind of seem to live in our little silos and get through our busy days. Having that connection is just so powerful for the human system. We're born to live as pack animals, like we're tribal. That's sort of who we are. And it's sort of, I always find it really amazing working at Les Mills, how, like you say, how many women were drawn into group fitness, but how much of a community that would build, and how much they would foster each other's own growth and development, or return to the classes and their own fitness goals. It was cool, really cool.
Yeah, it was really cool. So it's also really interesting to note that, in the blue zone countries, right, they rate community as one of the reasons that they think that people live longer. So, and women as well. I mean, we know that women have a longer lifespan than men. And I do think that, one of those things is the community. Yeah, the tend to be friends. I just really like how you said that.
Community connections, so powerful, so powerful. So in terms of, I guess, for me, when I high level zoom out on perimenopause, we often think, it's my hormones. But I often look at hormonal fluctuations, both in perimenopause and in other stages of life, as being a kind of a barometer of our health. Like it creates a moment for you to stop and reflect in on what's going on for your health and your well-being. And it tends to boil back down to some of the most basic things, like managing your blood sugar regulation, monitoring your muscle tone and your metabolic health, making sure eating right for you in terms of the amount of fuel you're getting in, a mixture of carbs, fats, proteins, managing your inflammation. Your gut health can show up as well for people. So if we talk about these, what are the kind of key things that you would recommend or focus in on as they go through this transition?
Yeah. So I have pillars of health as well that I use for perimenopause, and I tell a lot of women about these. So I actually usually start with rest recovery. So people sometimes go, oh, hell no, I need to do more because I've put on all this weight, so really I should actually exercise more. And I'm thinking, you need to back it up a bit. So let's look at what your movement throughout the week looks like. How often are you training, and when are you training, and when can you rest? Because, as your body is experiencing those fluctuations in hormones, your muscles don't recover as well. Your joints get very, very sore. So we need take that into consideration. So I really do ask women to go, okay, when are you really hurting and when can we actually rest? It is the time to back it up a little bit and change things around. So for example, if you're doing workouts at night, I'd recommend just switching that up to, first half of the day. We're playing with cortisol. Cortisol can be our friend, but it can also be a little nasty, on our recovery and sleep. So if we're able to work out, sort of before 12 o'clock, I think that we have a better chance of getting a good night's sleep. If you do train later at night, keep it gentle, keep it Pilates, keep it yoga, take a walk. But I would say, not go to that high intensity spin workout or that HIIT workout. Those are great in the mornings. But yeah, not so good.
Highest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a really high peak of stress hormone in the morning. Let's just use that.
Yeah, use it in the morning. Yeah, it's great. It gets you going, and then if you love that type of workout, that's the time. And then of course, people are starting to hear the benefits of strength training. And this is one of the things that I personally had to adapt to. I did have quite a big history of strength training in my 20s. Used to compete internationally in Miss Fitness. But then I kind of got over it. Like, I'm so done with, 8 repetitions, 60 seconds recovery. So I just got really done with it and moved right away from it. But now I've come back to the heavy strength training because, we're going through a period of time where we're losing muscle quite rapidly. And we know that does impact a lot of the things you've already mentioned, insulin resistance, and metabolism, our ability to maintain a good healthy metabolism for the fuel that we're putting into our bodies. So having more muscle or having great dense muscle, because in my case I can't put on much muscle, I'm just like ectomorph, but having good dense muscle and knowing how good it is for my joints and injury prevention, because those things are really important later in life. So the focus is shifting away from so much cardio and HIIT workouts and really prioritizing my strength training. And I would recommend that women do that too. I do get excited because I'm starting to see it in the gym. I am starting to see women going, yeah, hell to the strength, give me that barbell and what can I do? And that state of mind of I want to be stronger. So I just want to celebrate any woman who's in the gym, pumping weights now, keep going,
Totally.
Yeah. So those are sort of my key ones. And of course, on the nutrition front, you and I have exactly the same attitude towards the way that we could be eating. So I'm going to hand that back to you, Lisa. Or we could also say, check in to the episode between Lisa and I on sexy aging. Everything about nutrition for perimenopause is there.
I'll leave that on with you guys to go listen to for sure, because it's definitely a good deep dive, and there's lots more information to be had in that conversation as well.
Yeah, it was so good.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And before I dive into food, I think it's I just want to resonate with what you've said. More is not more in this phase of life, and I think the more I work in this space, the more I'm like the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears, the porridge being too hot and too cold and just right. It's the same for health. There's always a just right value for all of us. And I think when we get in trouble with our health, we often try and go for the too hot or the too cold to try and balance it out. And you're like, what if just trying to find just right's maybe where we need to be and go slow and slowly build on that across time and across context. So yeah, it's really interesting how that nervous system function is so important. And I think focusing in on sleep, even though it's hard, is often a really big win, because it really rewires that circadian rhythm, which really resets our hormones in general and can really help with this transition. The other thing I think is good for women to hold in their mind is going through this transition, it's a big shift for the human body, which means it's already stressful. You want to add more exercise and less food, you're adding more stress.
Yeah.
Situation. So you're like, let's just add more hot to the porridge and make it burning.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, this is a nice high level view to remind yourself that your body's coping with a change. Be gentle with it, be kind with it, be compassionate to it, because it's doing the best with what it has. And sometimes less is a whole lot more when it comes to our health and our well-being. I think the push towards women doing weights, I love it when I wander into the gym now and I see women that are my mum's age, my mum's sort of in her 60s or early 60s, and they're happily, pumping out the weights. They're curiously working with a trainer, learning how to ollie lift. I'm like, yes, girl,
so good.
bring that back.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
It's just to see women getting into this space when cardio has been such a thing, especially for anyone that moved through the Jane Fonda era, the old school fitness. Yeah, I must have been in that era vicariously. It's too much chance to join in for sure. But yeah, I think the nutrition component is also really interesting as well, because a lot of women that are currently going through this transition have been sort of coached through the diet era where you just cut the calories and eat less and exercise more, and that is how you end up getting to your results. That does not work in this phase.
No, I was actually just about to say, and we could have, spoken each other's language. It's when it comes to calories in, calories out, that generally works. That's a great equation. But when it comes to women in this stage of life, it's just off the cards. It's off the table. We now need to look at things differently. And so, incorporating slightly higher levels of protein to support that muscle density that you're trying to keep on your body, but also, that low GI carbohydrates, and not taking the carbohydrates away from your nighttime meal. You do need some of that there as well, and that helps to support your rest and your sleep and your recovery, and give you the right kind of fuel for your brain function. So it's actually a massive shift, a mind shift, especially if we've gone through that diet mentality. And for many of us, we've done a ton of those diets. We've done, from A to Z. And then you're coming into perimenopause and there isn't anything particularly fixed. It becomes a very general well-being with a slightly higher emphasis on protein. So, it's very interesting.
Definitely hear the word nourishment comes to mind with this particular sort of transition of life. Like, the more you can nourish yourself, and we know from research that weight gain, muscle loss precedes that, right?
Yes.
You have to lose muscle to gain fat. You have to lose your metabolically active tissue before you start to gain body fat and produce insulin resistance as an outcome. So the requirement for us to build muscle is protein. Protein in text means primary. It's our primary fuel for building things. Our body doesn't like to use it to make energy. It likes to use it to put the Lego blocks together and build up the body. As we go through this transition with the loss of estrogen, which is our muscle building or anabolic hormone, we really need to kind of double down on the two other things that help to stimulate muscle protein growth and synthesis and maintain our metabolic health. And that's our resistance-based training. And it's also having enough adequate dietary protein alongside dietary carbohydrate.
Yes.
Which I think is quite an interesting one. I've seen a lot of push for ketogenesis and intermittent fasting for this demographic. I just haven't seen it work.
Yeah.
I haven't seen women do really, really, really well in it long term. If not, they maybe have done well in it for a small period of time. You're like, cool, that did its dash. Now what do we do to kind of maintain that balance and sense of nourishment for you and keep working on this underlying physiological picture to get you back to a well-rounded sort of state of health?
Yeah.
So interesting.
It is so interesting. I mean, we could go on and on about that. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in terms of particular exercise, we mentioned strength training, you mentioned like yoga and Pilates. Do you think there's an ideal sort of balance to start with to figure out where you need to be for women going through this transition?
Yeah. So are you asking me like what I would recommend over a week? Like what? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Totally.
So I do have a program that I recommend for women, and this is generally women who do work out now or are just getting back into exercise. So I always prioritize 2 strength-based full body workouts per week with a 72-hour recovery period. And when I talk about recovery period, the days in between could be lighter versions of exercise. It could be a walk. It could be some yoga. It could be some Pilates. It could be a swim. It could be a hike. It's something that's not as intense on the body as that strength training program. A little bit of cardio in there is good too. The latest research shows that, the combination of strength and cardio is what contributes to longevity. So we don't drop cardio altogether. So if you do like jogging and you do like your spin workout and stuff, then those are great workouts to implement. Now, we're not going to leave HIIT completely off the table. There is a place for it because it's an opportunity to build yourself anabolically. And of course, you can throw in some plyometric training into a small HIIT window of 20 minutes. So plyometrics, the explosiveness, really also helps with your muscle density and pliability, agility, and keeping you sort of young and youthful. Like, even though we don't want to go into that sort of anti-aging conversation, I think that the ability for the muscles to feel springy and be able to react relatively quickly is still really good for you. So I think that's kind of how I've outlined it. So we've got 2 strength training sessions. We've got some cardio in between. We've got some mobility and stretch maybe in the evenings. Yeah, and I also do a core focus session where I just focus on my core strength. And when we talk about core, we're talking about front, sides, back, glutes, hamstrings, that whole package, because that's going to help support everything else you do, but it's also going to prevent injuries. So it's quite a mind shift. It's almost like a prescription of all these different things to build you up to be strong and have this great life in the future. And I think when you get your head around it's a different prescription, there's sort of a level of excitement about that. It's like you've taken up a new sport. Oh, wow, here's the prescription. I'm going to do that on Monday and I'm going to do that on Thursday and I'm doing these things and these are my options and don't forget to do this. I actually get really excited when I help women figure out their training regime for the week or the month or whatever, forever.
I love it. I think the word prescription's cool one because I remember going through uni and doing papers on exercise prescription. But then when you got into the industry, unless you're working with somebody one-on-one, it wasn't really prescribed. People were just going to haphazardly join the gym and either flail around trying to figure out what to do, get a trainer or join a group fitness class, which the workout inside those classes is prescribed. You've got somebody in front of you. But then I would always get amazed at members that would do classes back-to-back, or they would try and do 3 classes in one day. And you're like, hey, buddy, I saw you here in the morning for what are you doing back here for grit and attack? I think you should probably go home. One's enough. And I think that prescription component, we forget how medicinal exercise is. And I think when you look at all the research around the anti-aging or anti-aging, like living your best life as you go forward in life.
Pro-aging.
Pro being awesome. The exercise research trumps it all. Like it seems to be the most effective, whether you're trying to get into IV infusions or strict dietary protocols. Exercise seems to be the thing that seems to shift the dial the most, and it's also something that can be relatively really cheap to do.
Yeah,
it just requires commitment to yourself and some time for you to do you, but also prescribe yourself some health. And it can be enjoyable as well. I 100% just love the idea of music in my ears and getting to move.
Yeah.
It's another language we forget to speak,
Yeah. Well, actually really interesting that you said that because this morning I'm working on programming specifically for women in menopause, some exercise programming, and I include a Spotify playlist. So, and it's all music of our genre. So there's Madonna and Janet Jackson and stuff because it's so uplifting, right? So it's an app-based program, so they get to see what the workouts and the exercises are for the day. 45 minutes max, includes the warm-up and the cool-down, but you have a 45-minute playlist as well. And the feedback that I've had on the women is just like, I just love the music. I'm like, well, how was the workout? And they're like, oh, yeah, no, the workout was great, but I'm loving that you gave me music to work out to because, I'm not so good with my own playlist. And I always had this aspiration to be a DJ. So
making life all about music. I think my life is one big jukebox. I often find myself singing songs in my head at my desk. Probably shouldn't be, but it's such a great way to lift the mood, get you motivated, and take you somewhere else within an instant. Right? Headphones on, away we go. I'm compelled so much by music that I'm happily to sing and dance as I'm running down the road. I probably look like an absolute loony to the car drivers going past, but it's such a compelling thing when you really learn to let go into it. And I think for people like yourself and I who have been in the movement space for so long, music becomes organically just you muse.
Yeah.
It's something that gets you going and keeps you going. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Lisa, you can be in my squad. I'd be dancing down the street with you. No worries.
Love it. Sign it up. That sounds good. That sounds really good. So we've gone about the things that are really positive for women in the space. What are your top level, maybe that's not a good idea things? What are the top 3 things that you would say, if you could pull anything out, what would it be?
Yeah, I think you've already touched on it as the multiple workouts, back-to-back workouts thing. So in the space that I'm in fitness, I still see a lot of that. And it's, back-to-back HIIT and then cardio. and then waits and, like up to 3 hours. And I think a lot of that is because of that feeling like they're out of control with their body, that, they are putting on some body weight that they weren't expecting. And so they'll, just try to push the boundaries with how much activity they can actually fit into one day. So that's, for me, the first thing is, back it up, because you're putting your body into such a high level of stress that it's working against you now. We need to decrease the stress, right, to get the results. So it's just the polarity of that. I think it really messes with people's heads. The second one is, and you've mentioned some of the top tips already, but I'm, advocating for the nourishment of, good, healthy food, most of it color. Think of it as, how many different colors can I get into my body today? And that's the way we want to be eating, as opposed to, I can only have this at this time and I can't have any of this here. So it's a little bit more balanced, but lots of color. And one of the three things. What you said, 3 things to not do, right? Yeah. Well, there's another catch-22: stress out, because there are so many stresses. Like, especially for women during this phase of life, there's often teenagers, aging parents, and for many women, they've elevated through their careers. So there's a level of stress, in the work environment, or, responsibilities have gone up. They maybe have bigger teams that they're managing. And it's very, very difficult to manage the stress. And the thing is that stress will also impact on your hormones. So putting into place some really good processes to deal with the stress. So, talk therapy, meditation, journaling, yoga, those things really have to be a part of your life. And I think more and more people, not just women, have found that to be the case, that it definitely is something they can't do without. But during perimenopause, I'd be like, you have to do at least 2 of those things every day.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's interesting as well, like you mentioned about the generation sandwich. I've got teenage kids and I'm still helping them and looking after them, and they're kind of going through this, I think I'm an adult, but I'm not an adult phase. And in the meantime, helping aging parents, which is often where they're sort of retiring and needing more support. You think about that in context of traditional societies, like having children when you're, under the age of 20 or maybe early 20s, which meant that your kids would be 20 when you were 40 before you went through perimenopause and menopause. So they would have been adults with their own homes and their own husband kind of thing, and not your responsibility at that stage. Your parents would have been 20 years your senior, or maybe even slightly younger than that. So the gaps were smaller. And so a lot of these major life events across generations that work together wouldn't have collided, which it just highlights how much extra stress there is in this phase. And then the career path, I think there's I have a job and I'm really busy, and this is the time of my life when my kids have actually they're okay, and I can focus in on what I want to do and what I want to accomplish, which comes with stress. And if that's not the case, then I often find that mums are professional. They're like professional mums. They're on every board under the sun. If they're sort of, have had kids that have got kids, they're then professional grandmothers or nanas, and they're taking the kids to kindy and swimming and something or other else while their son or daughter goes to work because they don't want to have the nanny, and so they become the full-time caregiver again. Yeah. And you're like, whoa. Whew, okay, extra upon extra. So I think I really like the fact that you've highlighted how important stress management is, but also that inner reflection, like that a chance to understand why you do what you do to help you make those changes long term, and take yourself from the priority list here all the way up to the top. I think women spend a lot of their life, especially as mothers, and as nurturers and carers, we put ourselves so far down the priority list that it's not funny, that this part of life is the opportunity to be like, no, my health, my mental well-being first, my family, my partner, and then my career goes. Not saying you have to compromise on your goals, but I think it's putting things in place into your daily routine that fosters that organizational structure so you can show up your best for all of them.
Yeah. And I think it's better for the whole family that she does take care of her health.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Because we know that, perimenopause symptoms also impact greatly on relationships. you know, with your kids and with your significant other. So, you know, looking at yourself and taking care of yourself is essential for the harmony of the whole family. Actually, one of the other really important points that I was thinking about is that women at this stage of life will often leave their career because they can't leave their families necessarily, although some will. They could be at the peak of their career, but because of a lack of support for their symptoms or an understanding of what they're experiencing on the day-to-day basis at work, they will often just shut the door and walk away because they don't have that level of support, right? Because there's a lot going on at home. It's really confronting. And then, of course, the whole imposter syndrome that goes with that. So I think we're becoming a bit more aware of that. There are a lot of workplaces that are addressing it now. I'm actually doing workshops for companies and helping them understand what is the menopause and how do we support women in menopause at work, which is really exciting. Yeah, but it's definitely a conversation that workplaces need to have so that they don't lose these wise, dedicated, loyal, and super smart women that are just going through a bit of a challenge right now. But we can't afford to lose them, right? Because what they're going to do is they're going to go off and create the next best thing, and they're going to take all their skills with them. So, yeah, that's why we often do see women in midlife do a complete 180 and go and do the thing they always wanted to do, right? Yeah. I think that's really interesting conversation. But, you know, a lot of workplaces, they really can't afford to lose these women. They're better to address it and support them. And if they feel supported at work, then things are a lot better at home as well.
There's definitely a conversation I would love to explore with you in a later podcast. I think we've run out of time for today, unfortunately. So are there any final sentiments you want to leave our listeners with?
Yeah, I always like to leave on a positive and a high because oftentimes menopause is so feared and it is talked, you know, in quite a negative way. Oh, you know, this is going to happen to me, and there's a lot of fear with that. But I do think that, you know, when we have this education and understanding, life is good. You know, there's so much clarity that comes with this stage of life. You have a great bullshitometer. Can I say that? You can read the room really well. Your level of empathy goes up. Clarity around what you want to do, how you want to do it, and who you want to do it with. And just a really deep appreciation for the things that light you up. You know what they are, and you spend more time in that space. So I feel like, you know, this is such a great time of our lives, and I hope that lots of other women can, you know, help themselves sort out what they need for the support, and, you know, they go off. It's amazing.
I have to say, amen to all the above. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your passion with us today, Tracy. It has been a pleasure, and I look forward to chatting to you hopefully soon.
Thanks, Lisa.